to really kick it off and to get into it, we're at a really exciting moment here in Mongoose's journey. So we've officially evolved from being just an engagement platform or what you would consider a texting platform. And we are really going into a full conversation intelligence platform at this point. And we really consider that this is not just going to be a new feature set for us, right? It's going to be a whole new way of thinking about communication within higher ed. The shift has been a major leap forward for us. So we truly believe that the future of student, alumni, donor, overall campus communication lies in understanding and not just mass outreach. So it's about being able to personalize your messages. We want to be able to anticipate student needs and really approach every interaction with empathy and intent. So, like I said, we're not just about mass messaging. We're not just going to be about volume. And that's really exactly what today's session is going to be all about. So you're here for Conversation Intelligence 101, right? So we're going to be navigating our new dashboard and showing you where you'll be able to find your insights, how you'll be able to interpret them, and how they can help you be more strategic in your outreach across the board. So just a quick heads up before we dive in. I guess because this series has become a little bit more popular than maybe we even had thought or hoped. We're going to be officially transitioning this from a Zoom meeting that you see right now to more of a Zoom webinar format. So no action is going to be needed on your end. It's really going to be the same links, the same schedule. We just want to make it easier for us to be able to host and then also for you to participate in the chat a little bit more smoothly. So speaking of the chat, I want you to feel free at any point during the presentation and the demo of Mongoose to drop your questions in as we go. So same as last call, I'll answer any that I can on the fly, and we'll save the rest for my co-host John during the Q&A at the end, where we can really dig into some of these questions. And then for those of you that don't know me or weren't on the last call, I'm Jake Evans. I'm our Director of Product Marketing here at Mongoose. And really what I focus on is how to bring our products to life, right? So helping all of you, our users, be able to understand what's possible and how you can get the most value out of our platform and really where we're headed as we continue to evolve and really embrace conversation intelligence. So I'm joined today by John Caruso. John is our Director of Product Management, and he's been very influential and he's really been leading the charge on this push for our conversation intelligence platform and our conversation intelligence dashboard. So he's played a huge role in shaping what this experience looks like. So I'm really happy to have him on with me today. So John, I'll pass it over to you. Why don't you introduce yourself and you can take it from here. Thanks.
Sounds great. Hi, all. I'm John, as Jake noted. I'm very excited to speak with you all today about conversation intelligence and also our new dashboard that we just released. And I think just from starting at the very beginning, what do we mean by conversation intelligence? Well, first of all, I want to kind of zoom out a little bit before we get to the product features and all the interesting data and just talk about it from a human element. So what we're seeking to do at Mongoose is to understand the deeper meaning within how we communicate and do that really as human beings. So look at it at that level. And then through that understanding, we can begin to truly support each other in a productive and meaningful way. So when we're talking about a conversation, let's think about exactly what the attributes of a conversation would be. Well, first of all, it has to be two-way. Okay. A conversation isn't one way, although I'm sure you've encountered some individuals in your life where maybe it feels that way, right? Where they're speaking at you. So in our case, we're talking about a two-way interaction, and it involves each participant listening so that they can better understand. So within that, it's really a series of interactions or messages that are exchanged within a certain time frame that would kind of comprise this conversation. Okay. So what we've found at Mongoose through years and years of providing communication tools for higher education is that really when you look at unstructured message data, so looking at one message and one reply, or just a reply, or maybe like a blast message that went out that was a reminder or something, you really don't get a sense of a true understanding of who you're communicating with through your messaging. And oftentimes, if you're not getting any replies to those messages, it's not even a conversation, of course, at all. It's just a one-way interaction. So what we wanted to do here is group messaging up into distinct conversations and create a data structure that we can actually utilize. And that is the key for conversation intelligence, because without that structure, this wouldn't be possible. So it provides the context we need to go further and explore for an advanced understanding. And that's kind of where the intelligence piece comes in. So what we're talking about there is utilizing modern AI models and technology in order to kind of rapidly analyze data and then surface meaningful insights to you all and tell a story within these conversations. And that story may include things like, how was the contact actually feeling in the conversation? What emotions did they express? Did they receive the assistance they needed? Are they truly connecting with you? And are you building trust with them that would therefore foster further conversations in the future? So when we can decode these nuances within these conversations, we will be able to help you produce deeper, more meaningful relationships that ultimately lead to better outcomes for your contacts and your constituents. So in terms of what we'll be covering today, and I'm going to hop into the product in just a second and kind of take you on a brief tour of the new dashboard. We'll be talking about kind of how we got to this point, and then also, of course, the individual insights on the dashboard itself. Who can see what, which I'm sure is a question out there. Hey, there's data on here. Who can see it? Very important thing to answer. And then we'll talk about next steps for additional analysis to help you dig deeper and become more tactical now that you have these insights at your disposal. So just a couple notes on the first bullet point. The dashboard is really a visible kind of in-product culmination of the data analysis we've been performing on Mongoose for multiple years now. So we've looked at vast quantities of data and we've made some comparisons of things like, hey, what were the outcomes for contacts that never received a message at an institution versus the contacts that only received, let's say, those blast or reminder texts that I mentioned previously, versus the ones that actually engaged in these meaningful conversations. And the conclusion after analyzing all that data was undeniable. And that was that those that had experienced the empathetic, productive two-way conversations that we're talking about here achieved better outcomes. And we saw this across the board for all different types of teams. So it wasn't just one. And so we want to empower you all to experience the same success. And it can only really be done through intentional trust building, steps that you would take in your messaging. And it starts with a true understanding of the needs of your constituents, obviously. So a couple of quick notes before we jump in here. You may be wondering, well, how is Mongoose doing this? How are you able to actually, surface all of these insights? Number one, our conversation intelligence, it uses what we would call contextual AI. So we don't have a rigid formula for taking a look at conversation data and plugging it into some formula to come up with some conclusions. It's contextual, and that's going to allow us to better understand engagement patterns and outcomes. A couple of notes about that type of analysis, since we are talking about AI. At no point are we taking institution data and storing it in a location that is like available publicly or something like that. Everything is private to us and it's internal only. If you're interested in a little bit more about that, we have our own kind of data policies that some of you may have already seen, but we also have a data policy around it as well, which we'd be happy to share with you. So with that in mind, let's jump into the demo itself of the dashboard. So for those of you that have logged in since Monday, you would have seen that your experience has changed very drastically. And certainly this being the first page that you all land on, that should be pretty apparent. So I want to take us through kind of what is on this dashboard today. And I'll start with here at the top. We have a multi-layered view of the data. So you can see that we have this organization level, we have a team level, and a mind level. And this is where I want to start talking about who can see what. So if you are an admin user in Mongoose, you will be able to see the organization and team levels. If you're a standard user and not an admin, you'll just be able to see the mine area. And so the mine area represents your own conversation. So those are the conversations that you have literally been a part of, whether that's in a personal inbox or a shared inbox. The team and organization levels kind of aggregates that data as a whole at those different levels. So that's the difference between the kind of navigation there, but the insights that we're drawing are pretty much the same across the board. So at the very top of this, you can see that we're starting off with a 3-month view of data, and that is intentional. That's really to let you know kind of this is data that is relevant and current. It's not looking at data from 2 years ago or something like that. And this will give you a nice sense of the pulse of your conversations and your messages at these different levels. So right off the bat, we just spent some time talking about what really is a conversation. What do we mean by that? And we can see how many conversations we've engaged with at this particular level. And then right away, we can see how are the contacts feeling as part of that conversation, those conversations. Now, in our case, this is just test data. Keep in mind, this is our own internal demoing tool. So your data will, your experience may vary, right? Your data will be a little bit different than ours. In our case, from all our test messages, everyone is feeling generally positive, which is a good thing to see. Now, the bar underneath that will reflect what that essentially that sentiment is that we're showing. So there are 5 different potential options that you could see here. One is that you may be seeing a very positive, which of course would be fantastic. That's kind of what great looks like in this situation. Positive is next, and there's also a neutral, a negative, and a very negative. So if you are on really even the neutral, I would say you already have, some motivation to try to make some changes to improve the sentiment. But certainly on the negative and very negative sides, that's definitely something you're going to want to explore and dig into further so that you can improve. Now, underneath that, we have these most frequently expressed emotions, and these represent, based on the AI analysis of these conversations, what the contact was actually feeling through their messaging. Now, both this sentiment that we show and the emotions, those are both only from the contact's messages. So that is not a reflection of the outreach, the specific messages that the Mongoose user is sending. It's only about the contact's messages. So I just want to make that pretty clear since I know that's been a question already. And so we show the top 5 that were expressed. There are up to 8 emotions that we can pull from a conversation, and then there's one neutral. If you're interested in seeing what that kind of full array of emotions is, check out our knowledge base article because we've listed them all out there for you. So before I go any further, note that again, this is 3 months of data. So if you log in tomorrow, it stands a chance that your data will be different because we have advanced time one day. Similarly, if conversations are ending and closing, they will be added to this data set throughout the day. So there isn't, a time of day where this refreshes or anything like that. It's instant. All you have to do is leave the page and come back or just refresh. So moving on here, I think one of the most, perhaps the most talked about area of the dashboard thus far is this resolution status tile. And what we're seeing here is based on the AI analysis of conversations, what was the outcome? So was the contact helped? Did they receive all of the assistance they needed? Was it left open-ended? Did maybe no one even responded to the contact, right? Which is a possibility. All of that is reflected here. So again, in the kind of pie chart here, you see the number of conversations, which is of course matching what's up here in the last 3 months. And if you hover over any parts of this chart, you can see the percentage and the number of conversations related that's composing that part of the chart. You also see an explanation of what this means. So you can see that resolved means that it was a two-way conversation, and based on the analysis, the staff member was able to assist or help the contact to the point where we can consider the conversation resolved. If we move on to responded, which is kind of almost our gray area here, it means that the staff member or the user, they did all they could. They reached out, they sent a follow-up question, etc., but the contact never followed up. So they just kind of dropped the conversation from there. And then here in the unresolved, this is probably the one that would certainly garner a lot of attention, especially if this is a large number of your resolved conversations, resolution status conversations rather. So unresolved is basically the contact asked for something or needed additional assistance and no one helped them. So this would be a pretty bad sign if you logged in and saw that you had a high number of these. And certainly we would encourage you to work with us to try to unpack what happened in those situations and then get a little bit more tactical about what can be done. I'll get into that a little bit more here in just a second, but keep that in mind as we go forward here. Now, in the middle, we have conversations per contact. And what this essentially demonstrates is whether or not contacts are coming back to have more conversations with you. Why that is valuable is because if you have one conversation with a contact, that's certainly great. But if you have evidence that they're coming back to engage in more conversations with you, it means that you've built that connection. It means you've built that trust with them and they're coming back for more, which is super, super important. And it's a great indicator for you that your outreach is being effective. So in our test example here, we had several contacts that engaged in 6+ conversations in the last 3 months. That is fantastic. Those are probably your most those are probably the most engaged contacts you have at your team or your institution or within your own messages. So that's kind of the intention of what we're trying to show there. Now, we do know that the more conversations you engage in, the more likely you are to have positive outcomes. However, it also doesn't mean that you should just go out and kind of, blast away with messages trying to boost your number of conversations, right? So we want to be intentional about the types of conversations we're engaging in. And we also want to extend our reach so that we can reach as many different contacts as possible as well and try to draw them into more conversations. Okay. So that's what that one represents. And then moving on, we have a trending topics area. Now, depending on where you are at your institution and what department you're in, you will probably see a different set of topics here. So these are based on the department type, unless you're looking at the organization level like I am, where it's going to roll up the top trending topics across the institution. So what we've done here is we've extracted from each conversation what was the key topic discussed. And now we can surface that to you so that you can say, okay, these are the things that are the most important items that are coming up in conversations. And so kind of the value there is that knowing what those items are allow you to know what to focus on essentially. And so whether it's clarity and communication around those subjects, or maybe you want to improve a process or experience related to them, now you have a sense of what you should hone in on and focus in on more. It does display only the top 5. Obviously, there are more topics than just that per team, but that's what you'll see on the dashboard itself. And then, of course, the percentage of conversations where that topic came up. And then moving down a little bit here, what we see in the 12-month view is essentially the cumulative effect of your conversations. So as I mentioned, you definitely want to see this number improve and increase over the year because it's going to show that you're continuing to have outreach that is successful in engaging with your constituents, creating a connection, and creating trust that ultimately helps them achieve their outcomes. In our case right now, if you look at our test data, you can see growth in conversations, of course, over time. There will probably be times in the year where this plateaus, right? Which is totally normal depending on the communication cycles and the different times of the year. But by and large, at the end of a 12 period, you'll be able to understand really how far you've been going with conversations and whether or not you've been effective in engaging in them. And for our first release of the dashboard, it only includes text data. So that's an important thing to call out as well. You will see in a future release that we will be adding in chat conversation data for those of you that utilize our chat channel, and also WhatsApp as well will be added here too. So we can have a more holistic look at all of the conversations, not just text messages. And then over on the right-hand side, so you may be thinking, okay, this is great. We have all these insights now. We can see these things about conversations kind of in aggregate form. But now how do I take this information and understand specifics? So how do I understand things about the specific context involved? And what was the situation? What were the users involved? And how do I follow up on unresolved conversations? And what other topics came up besides just the trending topics, et cetera? For right now, the answer to that would be, we would encourage you to utilize right here on the page, the schedule a call button. And when you click that, it will allow you to schedule a meeting with a member of our client success team, and they will be able to guide you through a deeper analysis of the information you see here on the dashboard itself. Now, additional to that, in a future update, because we will be evolving this dashboard over time, we plan on introducing more tools for you to do some of this exploring on your own. So if you wanted to pull up specifics on certain conversations or certain situations, we want to be adding that in for you. So there will be a kind of a full set of further functionality that we add here that will ultimately drive home more of the value of this page. As I mentioned before, this is kind of the first step in what's been an evolution here, something tangible that you can see in the product. But we certainly want to continue to add more items to it to allow you to succeed with the data we're showing you. A couple other quick notes here. So if you're wondering what happened to my old dashboard, well, we didn't get rid of it. Down here at the bottom, you can still jump in and view your legacy dashboard. And if you click that, it'll just take you over to what the old dashboard used to look like. That's what you see here. And if you want to go back to the new one, all you have to do is click this little back arrow at the top of the page. Pretty simple there. You may be wondering, okay, well, this is what a dashboard looks like when there's actually conversation data. So what if there isn't any? The answer to that is we will show kind of a similar view to this, but of course there won't be any data. So it'll just be an explanation as to what each of these is, and then what you should do in order to start populating data. So if you are a brand new team or a brand new institution that's working with us for the first time, that's what you'll see initially. And then based on when you start actually sending some messages and engaging in these conversations, you'll start seeing the data kind of populate from there. So I'm going to hop back over to our slide deck.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. We definitely got a few questions coming in, but I think we'll cover this first. So before we jump into the Q&A, like I said, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you're looking for more guidance on how to get the most out of your dashboard, your client success manager is definitely going to be a fantastic resource, your best resource. And you can book time directly with them from the dashboard, as John alluded to. So you can start exploring, and as questions come up, I want to make sure that everybody knows that they're just one click away from support, so we can get you those tailored insights for your campus. And I know that there was a few questions that came in through the chat, specifically about maybe not being able to see the dashboard or maybe on an old version. So we will definitely have our client success team follow up with all of you folks afterwards to make sure that all of your settings are set up correctly and we have that all worked out for you. Okay. We can go to the next slide then, please, John. Great. So we can jump into the Q&A. I know that we had a few questions come into the chat, and I'll be feeding those directly to John. And anything that else that comes up, please feel free to add it to the chat as well. We'll answer as many as we can live. And if we don't get to them, don't worry. We will be able to answer them via email after the session and make sure that we have follow-ups for everybody. Also, if you want to keep up with some of our product tips and our regular updates, we regularly share these on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with John or myself, and I'll drop our profiles directly into the chat. So, John, the first thing that I wanted to pass over to you was how exactly do you define a conversation?
Sure. So for our purposes, a conversation is defined as a series of messages that were exchanged between a Mongoose user and a contact that contain at least one incoming and one outgoing message, followed by a period of 3 days where there's inactivity. So the number of messages we're talking about in a conversation could be, 3, it could be 30. But as soon as that activity stops and ceases for 3 days, now we are at the opportunity where we say, okay, we can look back at that set of interactions, which I talked about at the beginning of this call, and analyze that information.
All right, great. The next one, John, came in from Samantha regarding our trending topics. And Samantha wanted to know if the trending topics were based on inbound, outbound, or both types of messages.
So what the analysis does is it's going to look at the conversation and try to find a topic to kind of roll all the messages up to. So whether it's incoming or outgoing, if it's pertaining to the same topic, it's just going to pick that one. So it would consider all. Whereas in the case of the emotions or the sentiment, that's only looking at the contact in that situation. So just the contact's messages, not the Mongoose user.
Okay, gotcha. We have another one from Xavier of how does it handle resolution status when a student replies with okay or great, thanks, or any type of similar message that they don't need a response from. So I think this, John, is maybe it's more of just kind of some of the some of the pieces behind how we calculate that resolution status.
Yep. Generally speaking, that should be considered resolved. Again, it would depend on the context of the entire conversation, but something like that where it's not obvious that there's a loose end that's left or a question that went unanswered, that in those cases that would be classified as an unresolved conversation. But in that example, it most likely would just be considered resolved. Yeah.
Okay. And Mackenzie had a similar question for us on resolution status. Um, is it about their departments not answering questions, or is it more along the lines of like, hey, we think that this is still hanging out there? So maybe if you could just dig into that a little bit more.
It could be a little of both. So I mentioned that I'll give you an example of something that could cause that. So I mentioned that we will consider a conversation closed after 3 days of inactivity. Sometimes maybe just the user took a while to write back or they lost sight of a message, right? And then they write back later on. That that reply doesn't count as part of the previous conversation. And one of the reasons we did it that way is because really, especially when it comes to text messaging, the expectation on the contact side is that someone will reply relatively soon. So if you let something sit for 3 days, that's not a best practice. That's not going to help you create that connection with a contact. So in that case, the conversation would be considered unresolved.
Gotcha.
Other than that, it will look through the other messages within the conversation and attempt to arrive at a conclusion based on how the rest of the conversation went. So again, it's very situational. And that's why I think when you're talking about, well, how do I see these specific situations and understand what happened? I would highly encourage you to book that meeting with us just to get into the specifics of the data so that we can share deeper insights with you than just what you see on the dashboard today.
Great, great. We had another one come in from James, and I think, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but the entire dashboard is at this time is only going to be text messaging information except for the 12-month conversation graph, which will include text messages, chat, and WhatsApp.
So we're still going through the planning parts of what it's going to require to get the chat conversation and the WhatsApp conversation data into the dashboard. So there's a couple of different avenues open for that right now. And then how that data will impact the rest of the dashboard will actually explain when we have the full release of that. But for right now, of course, everything on the dashboard is just the text message data.
But gotcha. And can you maybe redefine for us the difference between, and I know this is a question that can come a lot internally too, responded versus resolved on the
Yes.
resolution status?
So in the case of something that is responded, and that was kind of the gray area or the gray color that we represented there on the dashboard itself. That's a situation where it's clear based on the AI analysis that the Mongoose user did reach out to the contact to either attempt to get more information or make sure that their question was answered or fully resolve any issue that came up. But that contact essentially never wrote back. So they just kind of they left it where it was. They didn't care enough to write back or say anything else, but it was an open-ended situation where the last, outreach was from the actual Mongoose user. Whereas a response, the result conversation is the AI analysis determined that everything went well with the conversation. The contact's needs were addressed. The Mongoose user did everything they needed to do in order to tie that up and make sure it was completed. And then it was classified in that way. So in both cases, we're looking at a situation where the Mongoose user did everything they needed to do. They tried to have a connection. They tried to make sure that the outcome was achieved. But in that case, of the responded, the contact just never really said anything else. And that does happen, obviously, from time to time.
Gotcha. The next one, Kathleen. Okay, so I like this question regarding topics for other webinars, and if we'll be digging into this further. I would say that we've planned our next few. So when we go on to the next slide, you'll see that we have a few more topics that we want to get to. But we definitely want to revisit this and make sure that we are continually helping our users and folks out with the conversation intelligence piece. So it might not be within the next 2 months, but as we get our users on board to this and they get more familiar with it, we definitely want to do another session to be able to dig into this. So the short answer is yes, 100% we'll be doing more sessions on this to help enable you with more purposeful conversations. John, the next one for you, are smart messages included as outbound and inbound reply from a student?
They are included. And as part of that, I love that question. And I love that you're utilizing smart messages too. We want to make sure that also the smart messages and the way that they're being crafted is also intentional because obviously that's a time saving tool. It utilizes an auto response in order to respond to incoming messages. So It will count as part of a conversation. It will be part of the analysis. But we certainly want to make sure that you're intentional about how those are written and crafted to ensure that you're maximizing them for the outcome of having a resolved conversation and ultimately a happy contact at the end.
Gotcha. Our next question from Patrick was digging into the unresolved conversations. I believe at this point, we don't have a way to dig in directly to what those unresolved pieces are. We are able to pull them for you, right? If we were able to get on a call with the institution. But that is on our roadmap for the future, correct, John?
That's correct. And, as I mentioned, what you see the dashboard today is our first kind of foray into exposing this information for you all, but it's certainly not the end. We know that we want to go much further with it and understand this, those types of questions help us do that. Right. And that's something else I should have mentioned earlier as well. The feedback that you all provide us on this first kind of initial release of our intelligence features in the dashboard, that's going to play a really critical role in where we head next. So please, be a squeaky wheel to us. Let us know what's interesting you or exciting you the most. What's confusing? What else would you like to see? We want all of that information because that engagement is going to be super, super meaningful to us.
Yeah, and I think Weston's next comment on this also kind of goes directly within that vein, right? So for our emotions under the overall sentiment meter, we aren't able to actually dig in at this point to if we have, for example, messages that were marked as angry. But that is the goal for the future to be able to dig in to see what exactly triggered those messages.
Yes, not on your own. So you can't do that on the dashboard itself. We are able to provide you with a deeper analysis. If you want to connect with us for a call, we can go through that and actually identify those conversations and situations for you.
Okay. Gotcha. Oh, I like this one from Ellie. Is it 3 business days or is it 3 consecutive days?
It's just 3 consecutive days.
Okay.
And so
Gotcha.
in a note about that for just briefly, so that was the starting point to us based on what we saw from analyzing vast quantities of message activity. If we see issues with it, like I don't know if you're maybe concerned about weekends or something like that. Um, we intend to evolve this, like I said, so do want to make it smarter in the future. So maybe there's a situation where we would say, hey, weekends don't make a lot of sense for this. Maybe we'll factor that in. So just something like that to consider for the future. But for right now, they are included.
Gotcha. I think this was an interesting one from Leslie. So, John, do you have any tips on managing conversations? It seems like their team has over 18 users and over 1,000 students directly within that team. Um, I'm guessing here it might be better to dig directly into the Mind tab so they can see their own information. I don't know if you would have anything additional to add to that.
Yeah, I like that as an approach for each user just to understand specifically what's going on with their messages. And as I mentioned, I don't know if you're using the shared inboxes in your case, but if you are, those messages are also included in the Mind tab, provided that that actual user was the one sending and engaging in those messages, right? So I would start there for sure. But in terms of just a brief note on taking the time for this type of outreach, I had mentioned a couple times that we're not talking about like a reminder blast or it's one way, just, hey, do this thing by this date, right? And we don't really care if you write back or not, which is there's a time and place for those messages, of course. But when it comes to this kind of two-way connection that you're trying to make, it's not, we often hear from a lot of users, hey, I don't have a ton of time to do that. Like I can't sit here all day and write back to people, especially when they're really, really responsive. But I would say this is one of those things that is absolutely worth your time because of ultimately the outcomes that you're going to achieve by doing so. Even if you say to those users, hey, take 30 minutes out of your day and just connect and engage in, even if it's a specific amount of contacts for just a little bit of time, just see how those conversations go. Because I think you're going to see a lot of positivity and a lot of positive outcomes based on just doing it that way.
Great, thanks. And another one that we have from Deanna is, as a manager, can we see the dashboard of individual employees that they have on their staff?
You cannot currently. So all the data that we're showing is basically in aggregate. So this also comes up if you're saying that, let's say you have an institution where maybe the teams don't really interact that much, but you're looking at an organization level and you're thinking, well, that's interesting. This team's doing things one way, we do it a different way. but their data is impacting our organization level. Um, you can't see specifics about that team or who the users were, who the contacts were, or anything like that.
Gotcha. And then, John, I think this will be the last one, and then we'll wrap it up because I know we want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So, similar to smart messages, do out of office auto replies count toward the conversations?
Auto replies out of office do currently because they fit the definition of a conversation. And keep in mind too that let's say Jake that I sent you a message today and you happen to be out of office and I received your out of office. First of all, I only received that once in a 24-hour period. Second of all, you might be back in a day and you might say, "Hey, I saw your message while I was out." Now this conversation is continuing, right? So that's
Mhm.
all those messages together would be part of the same conversation. So that was the initial rationale for it. I think in the future, as we look to maybe fine tune some of these things, I mentioned the weekends thing before. This is another area for us to explore where maybe, we could look at it and say, well, do we want out of office included? Yes or no? If no, is that a setting that we would let someone toggle, let's say, as an example? So things like that we'll look at for a future iteration. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, John, I think we can go to the last slide where we can just show the upcoming calendar for what we have. Um, so yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining with us today. I know we went a little bit over, so I really appreciate the folks that stayed on with us. We tried to get it to as many questions as we possibly could. I know that there were a few stragglers left in the chat that we will 100% address, and we'll be reaching out to you in the next few days to make sure that we get those answers over to you. A reminder, we'll send out the recording of today's session, so keep an eye on your inbox. And if you want to revisit anything or share it directly with your team. So our next session will be May 1st, and we'll be going over Mongoose Chat. We would definitely love to see you there. Reminder, this will always be on the first Thursday of every month. Um, and then to the point that I saw earlier in the chat, we will definitely take into account the questions that we had about what are some further session topics and the direction that we can go there. So thank you again, everybody, and we will see you next month.